I used to be on the Spanish radio station and kind of develop a radio personality, and was actually like guest DJ and stuff.
What?
And
okay, I can see it.
Víctor Covarrubias. Yeah, dude. If you look back, I mean, I'd be like,
saludos. Aquí les habla Juan Carrasco, el peladote de Chihuahua. I mean,
I got. Not only do I have the face for radio, I've got the voice.
Welcome to another episode of Two Dudes, One God Pod. Today, Pat and I have Juan Carrasco, but he says it different. That's the best I got. Carrasco or something.
Juan Carrasco.
That way, yeah. And anyway, Juan and I have done a little bit of business together, and the first time I met with him, we met for lunch, and he was like, "Hey, let me pray before we eat," and I was like, "Okay."
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we were just talking, and turns out we know some of the same people. Juan knows Jeff Butler.
Huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Known him for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff's known me when I was actually Big Juan. I'm medium Juan now, but I was Big Juan. I weighed close to 400 pounds. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So when I say Big Juan, I was big.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best compliment that I ever got on my weight loss was when I got on my horse and he didn't grunt. So
he didn't try to throw you off.
Yeah. So that once he didn't grunt, I was like, okay, I've made it. You know.
Yeah, we're good. He's happy with me now.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, but no, thank you guys. Thank you guys for inviting me to be here, and I've listened to a couple of the episodes and stuff like that, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah.
Especially just to get the word out. I think, Dre, you've mentioned that a little bit, and that's just kind of standard protocol. But I know when you when you see me, I mean, I know we're on a podcast here, but when you see me, this big guy, I mean, I look more like I should be a hitman for a narco or something.
Narcos.
Yeah, but I mean, I was. It took a long time for me to actually see the goodness of God and kind of like to be patient and to learn the grace that He has. So and I'm hard headed, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, Pat, I don't know you that well, but I know a little bit about trade. He was pretty hard-headed too. So, it's we're all here, and we're all works in progress, I guess.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey. Did you grow up in the church, or where were you when God really chased you down and found?
Where are you from?
Well, I'm from West Texas, Southwest Texas, out in the Big Bend country.
Oh, okay.
So, Lajitas, Alpine. I'm from a little town called Valentine, Texas, and a lot, some people know where it's at. Have y'all heard of Prada Marfa?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's actually not in Marfa. It's actually in Valentine.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, but it's like 40 miles from Marfa, but they call it Prada Marfa, and it's pretty cool. Actually, the ranch that my mom had after my dad passed away, you could actually look out her front door and you could see it across the railroad tracks. That little station there. So that's where I grew up, out there in the high plains. I grew up ranching, and rodeo was pretty much going to be my life. I roped high school, made the finals there. Roped in college, made the finals there. I pro rodeoed for a while, and that was all. That was my whole life. And
I'm surprised you still got your thumbs.
Yeah, for as big as I am, I got pretty quick hands.
Yeah.
So God had other plans. I always tell people, well, what happened? And I tell them, I said, life got in the way. I lost my dad. He was 48 years old. Kind of had to grow up a little bit and go back to the ranch.
How old were you then when you lost your
21.
dad? Okay.
I was 21, and it was a little bit dark. And
How old are you now?
48.
Dang, you're 48?
Yes, sir. Dang. Wow. All of a sudden.
Never ridden. I've ridden a horse. I rode a horse. Yeah, I've ridden a horse a couple of times.
Yeah.
you just sit on them and they just walk the trail and then they come back.
That's what when I was guiding, and we used to.
They just follow up
Yeah.
on deadheads.
Yeah.
Don't really think much about it.
That's pretty much what we had. No, I tell everybody, a quarter horse that I rode once, got on a dare, buddy of mine. We walked up to this thing, and he's, pretty, just a sorrel horse, blaze. Just beautiful. And my buddy says, man, I bet you won't ride him. So I said, man, at that time, there wasn't anything with hair that could buck me off,
Yeah.
or so I thought.
Yeah.
And so I got on him, and everything was going pretty smooth for a while, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but I kind of found myself kind of mounted sideways. And then I ended up behind the saddle. Then I ended up in front of the saddle. And this whole time I'm trying to get away from this thing, and this thing just kept jumping up underneath me. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you one thing, if that manager from Walmart wouldn't have unplugged him, I would have been in one heck of a wreck.
You see what I mean, Pat? I was like, this guy, he's like us.
I like it.
No, man. I'll tell you, growing up out there, it's a different way of life. It's the land of mañana. Nobody really gets in a hurry. Mm-hmm. If there's things to be done, and you could put it off till tomorrow, they will, because you never know. A neighbor's got to go out there. It really is. Everybody out there is pretty neighborly. They're going to help their neighbor. Yeah. They're going to watch out for their neighbor and stuff like that.
It's pretty remote.
Yeah,
it's like there's nothing out there.
You have to.
Yeah, you kind of have to. Yeah, and anybody that moves out there is kind of different. Like they pretty very quickly kind of get pushed to the side, or they accommodate themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing when I moved up here to East Texas, I was blessed enough to kind of start kind of following kind of the same-minded people. Mm-hmm. And that's been, I got to East Texas in 2003.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute, so. But yeah, growing up out there, that's all I ever knew. And like I said, God had other plans, and when I lost my dad, we went through a really dark time. And looking back, I do insurance. That's what I do now. Life insurance is more the emphasis of it, but because I've seen firsthand the importance of it. Mm-hmm. I've done the numbers, and I watched my dad. We grew up on ranches, and his whole retirement plan was he was putting a herd together because that's what he was going to live off of after he retired. And just to keep what him and my mom had built up to that point, about 18 months after he passed away, all of that was gone just to be able to survive. Yeah. And I'm sitting there, when I do the numbers, a little $250,000 policy at that time could have definitely been a life changer. Yeah. And everybody's got different needs, but that's why life insurance is important to me, mm-hmm. Because I've been there, I've seen it, so. But I've seen it happen to a lot of families, and yes, I understand that, they got a lot of these programs now, like GoFundMe and stuff like that, mm-hmm. but it's still not the same,
Yeah, definitely. When did you start noticing God in your life? When did you start?
Yeah, did you go to Marfa Methodist Church? It was like a mega church with 40,000 gophers. Or...
Gophers.
Well, out there's too many rocks. There's not really a whole lot of gophers, but no, I grew up in and out of the church. Grew up Catholic. My mom.
Really?
Yeah, my mom, devout Catholic.
Our second grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. My mom was, like I said, she and still to this day, very devout Catholic. One of the things, of course, me rodeoing and stuff like that, I fell off into that mentality, especially after, I left the house.
Partying, drinking, chasing women, dancing.
Yes.
You know how to have a good time, don't you?
Yeah. I've been accused of it a time or two. But no, so kind of put that behind me. But God's always been there. Now, looking back, you asked the question, when did I start noticing God? Looking back, he was always there. When I noticed him was basically in the times that I needed him really bad.
Yeah.
That's when I would look for him, look to him. But I'll tell you what happened to me was, and this is like, so I grew up Catholic, kind of, I mean, I know all the traditions, the exercise, everybody says, up, down, all that, and I understand all of that. My thing was I always had a lot of questions. One of the biggest questions that I had, it says that, that we should follow like sheep. Well, anybody who's ever ranched or farmed or anything, I mean, they understand that sheep are pretty dumb. Mm-hmm. So I always had a problem with that. And nobody could really explain it to me. But when I got here to East Texas, again, like I said, I was blessed enough to start getting around some people that I saw. For me, I always thought that if you were going to follow God, you had to be a certain way. You had to dress a certain way. And that just wasn't me. Men that I respected, that I kind of looked up to, Jeff being one of them. Mm-hmm. David Miller's another one that, you see him, just the nicest guy you'll ever see. Very godly, I started seeing them for who they were, and they were men of God, but they weren't what I had pictured. I've actually been baptized twice. Mm. If y'all can believe that. But when I was little, obviously the Catholic religion and stuff like that. But then when I got older and I had a family of my own, I started really like, okay, what am I doing? What's going on, with my life, and of course for my kids and stuff like that. And then I started reading up on, what baptism actually represents. And a little unknown fact about me was the fact that I actually read the Bible the first time, read it all the way through just so I could have an argument.
Yep.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I grew up in, like I said, being in the rodeo, world, these older guys, or even, just people in general were like, well, the Bible says this. And I just got so tired of that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I said, I'm going to read it. And I got pretty good at, the Bible does say that, but it also says this, and looking back, that is the definition of the living word. Yeah. Because when you read the Bible, today, whatever you're going through, that's what you're going to get out of it. But 2 years from now, you read the same verse.
Get something completely different.
You get something completely different. And that was my first, like, okay, this is the living word. That's what that means. But to really tell you, like, when I was saved, December 13th, about 10 o'clock in the morning, in a bathroom stall in Las Vegas, Nevada. Was sitting there with a buddy of mine had qualified for the World Series of Team Roping. We were sitting there getting ready. We were up around 1 o'clock, and about 10 o'clock we were just kind of watching. We were watching steers, watching the setup, kind of getting ready. And I had to use the restroom, and I got in there. Now, December 19th was, 2019 was a year that I was going through a divorce. Didn't understand it. Been with the same woman for a while. I still don't really understand it. I mean, I made my peace with it, but at that time it was really, really dark. And again, I was looking for God when I was going through dark times. Mm-hmm. But this time it was different. I had really started talking to these guys, these guys that I looked up to.
Started building that foundation.
Yes, yeah. Yes, and they would tell me things that I never even thought about, and it was just so simple. And so I started having my conversations with God, and stuff like that. And he showed up, he met me where I was, and I just happened to be in a bathroom stall in Las Vegas, Nevada, know, so that's when I first saw him. And I can still see, I can still feel, and I don't know, a vision, if you will. But to me, I mean, at first I couldn't even talk about it because it was just so surreal, so powerful. But now I found out that I need to share this because he did. I mean, I was the kind of guy who grew up very violent. I'll tell you, like when I was served with divorce papers, and I didn't understand it. Of course, my first tendencies was to go dark real quick.
Yeah.
had a really good friend of mine, another one of these guys. I was contemplating doing some very stupid stuff. And a buddy of mine, he called me and he's like, man, he said, do you want to go to lunch? And I was like, yeah. He said, I'll pick you up. I was working at the dealership at the time. I sold cars for almost 20 years. And he picked me up and he's like, man, and he owns a feed store. And anyways, he's like, I got to go see this field real quick to see how the hay's doing. And he said, you mind if we go? I said, nah, we'll go. We got out there to that field and he just kind of put the truck in park. And he goes, man, he said, what's going on with you? And I kind of looked at him and I'm like, what are you talking about?
I ain't being vulnerable.
Yeah, I kind of laughed at him a little bit. And, before I go on, I do have to tell you, one of the biggest things is like from my first marriage, I have 4 kids, but I have one that's biologically mine, but I raised the other 3. And that was my biggest thing was, when I first got served divorce papers, what's going to happen to my kids, because I raised them. But at that time, the 3 oldest ones were kind of older, but my youngest daughter, she was 12. And, I mean, it really hurt, And, but anyways, my buddy's like, what's going on with you? And I just kind of, try to play him off. And he just looked at me. He's like, look, man, he said, I'm your brother. He said, I know you're thinking about doing something. He said, I don't know what. And he said, and I've got your back no matter what. He said, because I am your brother. He said, but remember one thing. He said, whatever you do, he said, there's a set of 12-year-old eyes looking at you. Mm-hmm. And, man, that hit hard. It really, really did. And that's when I tell people, like, God showed up for me that day because I reached for a Bible instead of a bottle. Mm. And it was pretty intense for the next. We were in Las Vegas, and that's when God actually showed up. He met me where I was, and from that day on.
What happened? Like, what happened in that stall?
In the bathroom stall?
Yeah.
Well, see, I'd eaten some nachos, see.
Hey, I've cried out to him plenty of times in those situations.
No, I had really gotten my game, because when you go to, and you're roping in that kind of a platform. Now, I had competed in those kind of platforms before, but now, fast forward, almost 20 years, now I'm back on those same platforms. Yeah, the game changed a little bit, but the pressure's still there. Mm-hmm. You still got to get by them. You still got to have your game plan, and you got to have your mind right. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing in a game that hundredths of a second, can cost you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000.
Yep.
I mean, you've got to be set. And I took, I don't know how long to get my mind right. And man, I was roping. I wouldn't say I was roping as good as I did when I was younger, but I was roping pretty good. And I was trying to keep my mind right. Well, that morning I had gotten a phone call from my ex, and it was just really messing with my head. And I was praying, God, you brought me here, and he came to me and he said, you're asking the wrong question. And I kind of looked, you help? And I'm like, what? And then I said, Holy Spirit, will you help me? And that's when it happened. So when they say that that Jesus left the Holy Spirit is the helper.
Yeah.
And you got to ask the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit's the one that's here. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, like, all of a sudden it kind of heard. I'm not going to say like a train, but it kind of like a rumbling noise, real low, but it drowned everything out. And I kind of looked up, and I'm not kidding. I saw Jesus. He's a little darker than you would think, but hair. I mean, the wind was blowing. He was wearing a blue tunic like that, and he was just sitting there holding his arms out. And since then I've had plenty of conversations with God, and He always speaks to me in Spanish. Maybe that's because it's my first language. I don't know, but
I mean, He knows them all.
Yeah. Well, yeah, He invented them, But he's just sitting there, and he's just looking, and I'm looking at him, and I just start crying like a baby. I mean, I'm a big old dude, and I'm not really scared of a whole lot, but I mean, I cried like a baby. I remember, and the world part of me was kind of coming back, because I'm like, man, you're sitting there crying like a bitch, But at the same time, I was just so overcome, and he's just sitting there, just kind of smiling, and he's just holding his arms out. And, he just told me, eres hijo mío, which means he goes, you are my son. And man, I broke. And I'm kind of getting a little emotional right now, but I just walked up and I just got this big old hug. And that, like, I could see myself kind of up and feel the hug. I can feel the warmth, I can feel the strength. But also at the same time, it's like, I don't know, I can compare it like when you're holding like a little kid, like you want to hold them firm, but at the same time, soft.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And I mean, the whole time I'm just sitting there and I'm watching myself just sob, just cry. And he's just sitting there just holding me, man. And I don't know, like he's like, that's all he ever said to me, but I gathered, that he was there no matter what. And about that time, I heard my buddy, he's like, hey man, we gotta go. And I'm like, kind of came to, I guess. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, dude, he said, we got to go get saddled up. He said, because if not, he said, they're going to turn us out. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? I've been here for 5 minutes. He said, Juan, he said, you've been in here for an hour and a half, brother.
What?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And what seemed to me like 2 or 3 minutes. And when I kind of came to and I walked out, I mean, it was about an hour and a half later. And I mean, we walked out and we actually ended up doing pretty decent. But at that, my focus shifted from, I gotta, get here and I got a rope, right, so I can, kick some butt and, take some names and stuff. And it just shifted because my focus was no longer on the roping. It was just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Why, and then that feeling, and still to this day, man, I want to get that feeling again. And I started having conversations, and when they say, God speaks to everybody, but he speaks in a whisper, and you have to train your ear to be able to hear him. And in my experience, the more I train my ear, the louder his voice gets. Like, it's easier to hear him.
Yeah.
And I fast forward, got through the tough times. I mean, I went through a whole deal with my daughter once. I ended up getting custody of her. She's living with me, and fast forward a couple of years. Anyways, I met my now wife, my present wife, and I'd switched jobs. I was working, here for the insurance company. And one of the things, we went on a trip, and it was a cruise. It was the Greek islands. And one of the deals is Santorini, but one of the stops was Turkey. And a buddy of mine had said, he said, hey, man, he said, another buddy of mine told me that here in Turkey, is where the house of the Virgin Mary is. And I was like, man, that'd be pretty cool. Now, we had booked excursion, which was called like the safari tour. So we got off the ship, got on this tour bus, and we went out there. Now, the way they presented it, we're going to be in these dune buggies and driving through all this wildlife and all this and all that. Well, what it ended up being was, I driving through some sand dunes, and the only wildlife we actually saw were some. I mean, it was still fun, right? You're in Turkey, and it's pretty fun. But on the way back, we're like, hey, man, we got to find this house. And we told him, he said, oh, yeah. He said, I know where it's at. He said, where y'all came from? He said, it was kind of over there. So, unbeknownst to me, that's the best kind of adventures, like when you don't really know where you're going, what you're doing. That's what I like. Now, my wife, I love her to death, but she's got to have a plan. We get out there and we start talking to this guy, and he just asked us. He said, "Man," he said, "Are you Christian?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Where y'all from?" Texas. "Oh yeah, y'all are Christian." So we start talking and start visiting, and to him, he just could not understand why here in America, people walk into churches and to him that was fake news. But then he started sharing his story there, and he flat out said, he said, here, he said it's 88% Muslims. He said, and out of those 88, about 12% are really extreme. He said, but it just seems like that 12% is kind of the ones that are in power. He said, so we Christians, he said, we're still persecuted. And I'm just kind of like, I'm listening, and I'm just like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, he said that, if they find out you're Christian, then all of a sudden maybe you can't buy groceries at your local grocery store, or, for whatever reason your kids can't go to a certain school anymore. He said, our church, he says, we're always having to move it. And I'm asking him all these questions, and I'm just sitting there thinking like, here in America, and me growing up the way that I did, it's like we take everything so for granted. And here's this guy hiding, and not in fear for his life, but in fear for his livelihood, to be Christian. And his goal was to get to America so he could be a Christian openly. And he takes us up there to the house of the Virgin Mary. And man, if y'all, the story there is just, man, it's phenomenal. But when we were walking up there, the ambiance of that place, first of all, the house of the Virgin Mary is a house that John built for Mary after the crucifixion. And so when you get to where it's at, you can see why, because it's up in the mountains, it's up in a remote little old canyon over there, and it's got some spring water, and you really wouldn't know that it was there. But when we walked through there, I actually walked through the house, surreal, everything is surreal. And at that point, I had a friend of ours that was with us that he was going through a bad time. And at this point, I'd been asking God, like, hey, I hadn't heard from you in a while, am I still on track? Because I always check, because I've seen myself mess up things pretty quick, so I always try to check back. And we're sitting there, and my buddy, there's a place when you get out of there, you can come back over here and you can write your prayers and set them up there, or you can light a candle. Well, he was going through a bad time, and anyways, he wrote something, and he walked up to this little wall where you put the prayers at. And another friend of mine was sitting there talking to me. The other guy that was with us, he's talking to me, telling me some story. And I looked up, and I seen my buddy just standing there kind of with his head hung. And man, you want to talk about, you heard God there, because he told me, ayúdale, which means help him. And man, I stood up and I walked right over there, and I put my arm around my buddy, and I told him, look, man, I said, I don't know your situation 100%. I started praying. I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember what I prayed. But afterwards, I know it was powerful, because like 4 or 5 times now we've talked about that. And he's like, man, he said, how did you know that? I said, that wasn't me. I can't get him to understand that I don't remember what the prayer was. But it was really good. And then, we left there, and I'm being very thankful, because it feels good to be used that way.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we got down, and then he goes, do y'all want to go to the ruins of Ephesus?
Cool. Yeah,
dude,
I'd love to go there.
I didn't even know they existed.
Yeah.
So we're like, sure. So he starts telling us, our cab driver was a heck of a tour guide. He starts telling us, the story of Ephesus and what all was happening at the time. Well, for those of y'all that don't know, that's a city that Paul was in when he wrote the book of Ephesians. It was under Roman control, and he was telling us, kind of the stuff that they did to the Christians. And it was, phenomenal just to be down there. And I've got a bunch of pictures, and it's just so surreal to just sit there and go, okay. And you're walking down there, and they've got these ruins, and they pretty much say, hey, this was pretty much like Manhattan of its time, and, what to kind of explain to us the way the geography laid back then, and, all of that. And he said, well, the cave that Paul kind of held church was up here on this side, and we didn't get to go up to that, but from what the guy was telling us, he's like, man, he said, you would think that this thing is so much bigger than it really is. He goes, but it's a little cave that probably fits at the most maybe 15 to 20 people. And when you think about that, like Christianity kind of started in a cave. It didn't start there, but
right.
That's what people had to do
to meet together.
Yes, and then I got to sit there and go into the Colosseum that Paul was supposed to preach at. Right before he ran from Ephesus. They had set a trap for him, and he was supposed to go in there and preach. They'd kind of given him permission, but it was a trap. And, of course, God intervened, and he ran from there. But it was just, man, it's just so surreal. So when tell me, like, when have you noticed? I've noticed in my whole life, he's just gotten a lot louder,
over time.
The older that I get. So.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. So that keeping the training of the ear, you know, and I'll say, like, you were talking about horses and stuff earlier. You start to learn their responses whenever they resist. Like then you learn how to get that resistance out and find another path and everything like that. I think that why would God even look at us as as anything, because he's so mighty and powerful? Like why would he condescend and come down to us? Well, let's go train a horse, go train a dog, and you'll see that image of God kind of coming through us in a sense of
that's actually a really good comparison, and I guess in a way you can put kids in there also, because and I'm just going to go back to training a horse, and you'll fight with him, quote unquote fight with him, but you're learning his language. He's basically learning you, you're learning him, and you're wanting him to do all these great things, but you'll be very satisfied if you can just start here. And man, I've said this to some friends of mine. I'm like, you would be surprised how if you would just do this little thing. God's the same way. You would just do this little thing, like when you're training a horse, and you want him to kind of switch the lead, so, and then when he switches it, man, it's a big deal, and you stop, you pet him, you reward him, you walk him, you might even unsaddle him, just reward him for that little bitty thing. And I just tell him, I said, God's the same way, man, because when you follow him, when you actually truly do what he wants you to do, even if it's the smallest thing, you'd be surprised the rewards that come with it. I mean, and now I guess in my journey where I'm at, I kind of look back at some things and I was like, wow, I was blessed this way and this way for that. And I'm like, the blessings just they don't match up, So it's really weird. It's not weird, but I just to have that faith. And going back to the sheep comment, now I understand it. Because it's blind faith. You it's just blind faith. You don't know what's going to happen. You just know that the shepherd told you to go there, so that's where you go. You just trust that the feed's going to be there, the water's going to be there, whatever you need is going to be there. And now it's very clear to me, and I don't know. I don't know if I get down on myself for being so stubborn for so long. I don't know.
Well, at least you're aware of how stubborn you are. Now you see the correlation between sheep and me.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that I really truly believe that there's a lot of people out there that I don't think that there's anybody that's 100% evil, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I think that society and the world has made them that way. I know for me it was like I had to be like growing up, especially growing up Hispanic in the Hispanic culture, the machismo culture. I had to be a man. Don't ever let them see you cry. Don't let them do. And it was bad. And I was blessed enough though. My dad, may he rest in peace. I heard stories about my dad when he was younger, like after he passed, where I was like, wow. Like my dad was the kind of guy that didn't take crap from anybody and backed it up. Violent, just whatever. But when I was little, I watched his relationship with my mom was one way. But I was blessed enough to watch him evolve.
Yeah.
So to me, I guess my involvement was easier because I had something to compare it to. Because to me, I'm like, man, if my dad could change, so can I. And there's a lot of people out there that don't have that to compare to.
Yeah.
So I figured if I can be out there, people who know me and they can kind of talk to me now, if they can see, like, if they knew me back then and they see me now.
The fruit.
Yeah. And trust me, I'm not perfect. I still fall on my face all the time, but I try. That's the biggest thing. It's kind of like that horse. As long as he tries, I'm going to reward him, and I see that with God. As long as I'm trying, he's helping me.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that was, and this is very recent, actually, when you and I spoke, Trey, about coming out here, this actually happened after you and I spoke about this.
Oh, wow.
So I go to church in Lindale at Life Source.
Okay.
So when I was going through my dark time, through my divorce and stuff like that, and I took my little girl, she went from being a social butterfly to just being just angry,
Recluse.
very different child. And I knew that I had to get her. There was a lot of things, and we're all better now, but I just knew that I had to get her out of a certain situation to where, I could have her. Well, I did what I had to do, and I did get her, and then I didn't know what to do then except take her to church.
Yeah.
That was the only thing, because at that point, remember, I was kind of going through my thing. And so I started taking her when the church was little. Well, Ryan Hobson was going to this church, but Kevin and Sue Ann Bardwell were really good friends of mine for a long time. And unbeknownst to me, they were going to church there also. Well, their middle child and my daughter grew up like brother and sister. So the first time when we took them there, of course, my little girl, she's like really held off, but then she saw, Gabriel, that's the young man's name. And so all of a sudden she's like, oh, okay, this is cool. So we started going to church there, and she really became involved. And now I'm telling you, fast forward, like my daughter, like when you talk about journeys, like I really think when it comes to God, like her and I are on the same level. Like she's 17 years old, but I think in maturity as far as Christianity, we're on the same level. Because she's spoken at Ignite. She's been asked to speak at Fields of Faith. That kid really, the best thing I could have done, I didn't do anything except take her to church.
Yeah. Just be obedient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and she had gone through this class, and she kind of told us, in the class is called, Forgiving Forward. And, I was sitting there like, oh, okay, we'll do this. And, of course, my wife, she was like, we really need to do this. And we ended up going through that class, and we had just started it when you and I spoke.
Man, I wish you had said something about it, because I think the Forgiving Forward deal is amazing. We had Brian, you know Brian Childress?
Yeah?
Yeah. Brian Childress is the guy that brought Forgiving Forward to East Texas.
Yeah.
He talked about it on our podcast episode.
Yeah. Did y'all have him on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
He
episode's
released a
out.
few episodes back.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that episode. Yeah, I'll tell you, I went there kind of, looking back, I kind of went like, okay, I'm going to go because my wife wanted me to go. My daughter really wanted me to go. I'm like, man, I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
I don't have any unforgiveness.
I don't need to work on myself.
And the thing was, like, my wife, she went on the Emmaus walk.
Oh, really? Walk to Emmaus?
I always say that wrong. How do you
Yes.
I think it's
Emmaus.
walk to Emmaus.
Walk to Emmaus, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she went on that, and so my wife's got her very own story also. But
We'll
she
have her
learned-
on next, and she can tell us all the stuff you left out.
Yeah, good luck. You take it away from. You're gonna have to like put it over your love save. But no, but she went on there, and she came back and she was explaining it to me. She was like, "I really want you to go on that." Well, because after I lost my dad. Growing up the way that I grew up, I was the only male child. I was the youngest of three, and I was also the boy of the family, the man of the family, right? And my dad, like, I can't remember when he started doing it, but he was like, hey, one day I'm not going to be here, and you're going to have to step up. There's not going to be a time for tears or nothing. Your mom's going to be a wreck. Like how he knew that, I don't know. But it was just kind of drilled into me, over time, over the years, over that. And I would always change the subject. Dad, and I'm telling you, dude, my dad was in better shape than all three of us put together. And, when I lost him, I kind of went into that, I guess, what he had been training me for so long. Like I put all emotion to the side and just got what I needed to get done. My mom was a mess. I have two older sisters. My oldest sister, boy, she was really a wreck. My middle sister, she really stepped up, and between me and her, we kind of took care of the funeral arrangements. Kind of took care of it all, right? And got past all of that. Of course, we went back home, and I started working on the ranch that I grew up on. And it was, I don't know, maybe 6 months after that, I was coming off the mountain. I've been checking some waters and stuff, and looking up. And if you've ever been in the mountains, you know what I talk about, like when the wind could be going one way down low and then it switches directions, 15 feet up, and it could be really strong 20 feet up and no breeze down below because the mountains the way they are. But I remember looking at a red-tailed hawk, and he was, I don't know, about 30, 40 feet up in the air, and boy, that sucker's flapping his ears. And first of all, the red-tailed hawk's pretty cool to look at, and they're not that common. They're not rare, but they're not that common. So I was sitting there staring at him, and I'm sitting there just driving down this truck. I mean, I could describe the truck. I could describe the noises. I can describe what I was wearing. I mean, it's just one of those moments. And I looked up, and I saw that red tail. I mean, he was just flapping, and wasn't getting anywhere. And I remember thinking, like, man, if he would just drop down a little bit, he could catch a whole different wind stream, and it'd be so much easier. And right about the time that I said that, he did. And boy, he just swooped in there, and he just perched on this post, and he just kind of looked back. And I still to this day, I do not know what happened, but the next thing that I can remember is I'm about 30, maybe 35 yards away from the truck, and I'm on my knees and I'm crying. And I guess that's when, I know now, that's when I was actually like let my grief out.
Yeah.
Because I had been so groomed into keeping all of that in that I was able to let it all out. And then I did go on a walk. So when my wife was talking about the walk and kind of this and that I kind of did something similar, but I did it on my own. I remember my Uncle Hector, my mom's brother, big spiritual influence in my life also. He helped me through that. So when my wife was talking about that, I was like, yeah, I've kind of seen that, I've kind of felt that, as far as like, forgiveness. And then my wife was like, look, I didn't know, I thought, I was good, but, I learned how to forgive this and forgive that. When I was asking who do I need to forgive and, kind of how forgiveness works, for her it was very eye-opening. And for me, I was like, well, I kind of know how that works, I got this. So we start this class, and like I said, I mean, I'm sitting there going like, I kind of know how this works. And they made some really good points. Then I really started getting into it and going, okay, I didn't really know that because, I mean, he does, they do because it's him and his wife. They do a really good job of explaining what you have to do, but they do an even better job as to why. And that was my biggest question. Okay, why? I mean, I know what I have to do, but why? And they started kind of explaining that, so it made a lot of sense to me. The class that I went through, made some good friends, seen them at church, and I'm pretty sure anybody who's listening to this knows those people. Like you see them every Sunday at church. Hey, how are you? Hey, but that's pretty much the gist of it. Well, now these guys that went to class with, I mean, like we actually stop and talk to each other. I actually know their names. I kind of know what they do, and stuff like that.
Because you had a shared experience with them.
Yeah, and it was so different worlds kind of in the same spot. And but I tell you, like, so we went through the class. It's a 6 weeks course, and anybody who has not gone through that needs to. And if you've done it, I promise you, I've had people that said they've gone through it the second time and got something else even better. But like so you got to kind of write, like they tell you, like, okay, we're going to do our one-on-ones, and you got to kind of find out who you have to forgive and this, that, and the other. And they kind of give you this protocol, and I'm not going to ruin it all, but so my wife and I were sitting there, and we're like, okay, we're going to make some notes, because unforgiveness in your heart, well, they don't even realize it because it's just there, and I'm sitting there, it really bother me anymore, no, I mean, yeah, it was a bad deal, but it doesn't really bother me anymore. I really wanted that. Where I got hung up is like, okay, you can forgive them, right? But then you have to bless them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you something. It was a little icky for me, but when they said, okay, now you have to bless them in a way that you want them to be blessed, and I'm just like,
That's an interesting concept because, in recovery, you do an amends step, where you have to, make things right with people, like you not just say I'm sorry, but like make a meaningful change and try to fix the hurts that you caused. And I had a lot of resentments. I had a lot of people that I probably needed to forgive. And what's interesting is the 12-step thing, it's not particularly Christian, It was framed up by people that were believers, but it's, Jesus isn't in the book, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the guidance that I got, when I was brand new, 6 months, a year clean, is I had these people that I had maybe even good reasons to be mad at, right?
Yeah.
I really,
Legitimate.
Yeah, legitimate, but the recovery, ethos teaches that we've lost the opportunity or the right to have what we call justifiable anger. So that's like the anger that Jesus had with the money changers at the temple. So I don't have that ability, because when I get angry, I get loaded. You know what I mean? Especially early, right? And the feedback that I got, the guidance that I got, is they said, well, hey, you need to pray for to have forgiveness, to have the desire to have forgiveness, right? But then they said, after you pray for everybody that you need to forgive, you also need to pray that they get everything that they want in life. And I got that 20 years before I heard about Forgiving Forward. 18 years before I really came back to church, And so there's just, it was to me, when I heard about Forgiving Forward, I went, okay, this is good. I understand this. I get it. Because I've experienced the healing of forgiving somebody that really maybe didn't deserve that forgiveness. Some bad things happened, and, but then I got the blessing and the healing from inside of me, letting go of that, because otherwise it's like drinking poison and hoping that the person you're mad at dies. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and then once you kind of get it, for me, that's what it was. It was like, okay, I've been doing this all wrong, and going back to that list, we're sitting there, and then and I knew that I kind of had to, forgive my dad, and the only thing I could think of was, forgiving my dad was because he died on me, because I spent my whole life, because my dad was very, very hard.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your relationship with your dad. What was that? We just got off of what we call Freedom Weekend here at Wilderness, and there's a component of that where we deal with, guys' relationships with their sons or their children or their fathers, and it seems like 9 out of 10 guys that go through it, it's a big deal. And this time I was the guy that shared my father wound with a group, and it was
Powerful.
Exhausting for me. I mean, and it was
very powerful though.
I got a lot of good feedback, but it's like, I don't know what I said, even though I read it off of what I had prepared, because I knew if I didn't write it down, it wouldn't have come out. But
No, that's...
what was it? What was the dynamic with your dad like?
So, like I said, my dad grew up. I mean, he was here. My dad was actually one of those Hispanics that believed that if you were in the United States, you should learn to speak English. I mean, which ironically enough, I know a lot of people are like, what? Because that's not the norm now. But
Right.
A funny thing about my dad was very fluent in English. Learned on the words like ball, bald, and ball. And he was like, I mean, the silent letters just kind of threw him, but he could speak it. But my dad was a very prideful man.
Yeah.
And he spoke it, but he spoke it with an accent. So if he were here today and, you introduced yourself and you say, mucho gusto, as long as you said 1 or 2 words in Spanish to him, you were not going to get him to speak English to you.
Really?
Now, you two could have a conversation. We could all be having a conversation. He'd be standing there and you'd think he wasn't understanding.
Yeah.
But he literally understood every single word, but he would not speak it because of the accent that he had.
Yeah.
And he could not surpass that accent.
Considered it a bit of an embarrassment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
Well, we encountered that when I introduced you, because I know how your name is supposed to be pronounced. It just doesn't happen in my mouth. It's just
well, I tell everybody it's like a Dukes of Hazzard last name. It's like Carr with Roscoe behind it.
Carrasco.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Sí, ya que no sé español.
Ah, sí.
Sí.
Es todo. ¿Dónde lo aprendiste?
Con escuela, y yo tengo muchos mexicanos amigos y yo trabajar con mexicanos siempre y en los ranchos también y
Hold on. I'm going to translate. You learned some in school, but you have some friends that speak Spanish too, and they spoke it a lot on the ranch. Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
See, I can't speak it. I can order tacos,
See.
Yeah.
you know. I can say, where's the weed? I can say a handful of other things that I don't want to have to edit out of the podcast, and it's just not a useful. I don't have useful grasp of Spanish.
Yeah. And see, you just kind of reminded me of growing up. I had a really good friend of mine, Rex Miller. Jonathan Rex Miller was his name. Blonde hair, blue eyed guy. But everybody out there in West Texas, everybody speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
And everybody speaks Spanish the way that I do.
Yeah.
And real funny story, like when we got off to college and stuff, of course, you get these other Mexicans that think that the white people don't speak, Spanish.
Yeah.
And this other friend, I'm not going to mention his name because he might be hearing this. But anyways, his truck was broke down. Now Rex was a pretty good mechanic, and I pulled over. Hey man, what's going on? Of course, I'm talking to him in Spanish, and he's like, "Well, this thing broke down. I don't know what's going on." I said, you mind if Rex takes a look at it? Now Rex never said a word. All right, he just like hey, just kind of hey, what's up? And I'm like, hey man, you mind taking a look at it? He just kind of nodded and went to looking at it, and the whole time, my buddy was like, este bolillo, what's this white guy? I mean, what's this white guy looking at my truck? He's not going to mess it up, is he? He's just kind of talking in Spanish, and I just kind of smiled, and just kind of said this. And then, Rex did whatever he did because, this guy could literally look at an engine and go, okay, this is what it's doing. Yeah. And he just looked at him and he told him in English. He was like, hey, he said, why don't you try it? So my buddy reached in there and he turned it on. Fired right up. And so Rex jumps off and he's like, hey. So my buddy steps out. And he asked Rex in English, so what was it? And Rex, I'll never forget. He's like, no, pues mira lo que estaba pasando. Hey, and I will never forget my friend's face. You talk about the jaw drop. He's darker than me, but he turned white, and he just kind of sitting there going like that. And then Rex just kind of smiled. He's like, no, he's telling him in Spanish. He goes, soy más mexicano que tú. He says, I'm more Mexican than you are. So it was pretty funny. But growing up with my dad, that's who he was, very prideful. But still to this day, and he passed away in '99, and still in West Texas, I'm Marcelo's boy. I'm not Juan. I'm not Big Juan. I'm not nobody really knows who I am other than, I'm Marcelo's boy. That's how I grew up because that's the kind of cowboy that my dad was. Mm-hmm. His actions spoke a lot louder than his words ever did. So growing up and living up to that, was hard. And my dad wanted me to live up to that, and he was even harder on me.
Yeah, he wanted you to be better than him.
Yeah, and it was, I remember, from the time I was 5 and 6, we were tagging calves and roping, and I'd be in the saddle. I had a pony. I remember, they got pictures of me, riding back up. My dad tied me in. I was asleep, and I've been in the saddle, for 12, 13 hours, and I'm 5 and 6 years old. Mm-hmm. But that's what my dad expected me to do. Now, when I turned, 11 and 12, I'd be very honest with you. When I was 14, I got stopped by a highway patrolman. I had guns, I had alcohol, I had a truck. I was about 4'11" at the time. I still hadn't gotten a growth spurt. Had a trailer full of horses, and I'm driving on a state highway. And the highway patrol, of course, out there, there's no traffic, but the highway patrolman, I remember we kind of met on the highway. He kind of looked. Heck, I could barely see over the steering wheel. He turns around, pulls me over, and he's like, what? But that's how I grew up. That's what my dad expected to me. So to me, it didn't matter my size. I'd better get stuff done.
Yeah. What'd the highway patrolman say?
Dude, he walked up and he's kind of looking at me, and he's looking around to see if he can see somebody else. And
somebody hiding or something?
Yeah, and I'm just like, I'm just smiling. I got my hand. I knew to keep my hands on the steering wheel, And he's like, he said, good afternoon. I'm like, yeah, good afternoon. And he's like, you by yourself? I'm like, yes, sir. Of course, I needed to mind my manners,
Yeah, definitely.
And he goes, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to the Chilicote. That's a ranch that we grew up on. Now, going back, out there, you can get to everybody's ranch through the back roads. So what happened at 14, I would hire out as a full-grown man to go day work for 15, 20 days, 10 days, whatever they needed to me, and I'd go camp and be out there. Well, on my way back, I was going to go through the back roads to go back to the ranch, but the foreman wanted me to go to Marfa because I needed to get supplies because we had to work, we had to work at our ranch. So I was like, okay, to me it was no big deal. He's like, hey, look, he said, they've already got it all there at the feed store. Talk to such and such, they'll load you up. And he said, then come straight home. So, okay, so that's what I did. Well, I was headed back to between Marfa and Valentine. Well, my plan was to go all the way into Valentine because that was a lot better road, dirt road, once I got there. But I knew the country well enough to know how to get back to the ranch, and there was a gate about a mile up the road. And I guess this is part of my upbringing. Like, my dad was always like, you got to be done. He said, you need to use your head. And he said, where are you going? And boy, right then and there, I was like, well, I said, about a mile up the road right here, going to cut off over to the Bright Ranch. And where are you going? Chillicote? He says, oh, okay. He's like, so nobody's with you? I'm like, no, sir. And I kind of told him. And I remember he kind of sit there and he kind of scratched his head. He says, what's that in the back seat? And, of course, it's couple of cases of beer. And I'm like, beer? And, of course, I had a 30-30 sitting right here, and I had a pistol because out there, you carry. And he just kind of, I don't even remember that gentleman's name, but he just kind of sat there, and he kind of looked back and forth, and there's nobody on this highway. And he just looked at me, he said, so you're telling me you're going a mile up the road, he said, and then you will not be on this highway? And I'm like, yes, sir. I said, that's my plan. And he's like, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'm going to go. He said, I'm going to follow you. He said, but if I see you, he said, on this road anymore, he said, I will have to arrest you. Do you understand that?
To jail.
Yes, sir. And boy, I drove. Boy, I marked my signal light, and then afterwards I remember the trailer didn't even have lights. But I'm marking my signal light, doing all of that. But those are the kind of expectations I grew up with, with my dad. He expected to me. And to me, like, I told him that, and the foreman and all that, man, I'm so sorry I put you in that predicament and this, that, and the other. And my dad was like, well, what'd you tell him? I like, well, this, and like I told you, well, I remember the guy. He said, well, good. He said, you finally used your head a little bit. That's who my dad was. Yeah. Like, it wasn't like, oh my God, what happened? No, it was like, what did you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a big moment.
Yeah, and
you think your dad was proud of you?
The funny thing is I never knew it until after he passed. Like, I really didn't. He never once told me. He told everybody else, but he never told me. To me, it was, you did good, but you could have done this. Especially when I started roping, when I got in high school. I was, out there, I grew up with a rope in my hand. Heck, I got in trouble for roping chickens when we were little.
Geese and all that.
And so that was going to be my life. And when I got the opportunity my senior year to rope with a buddy from another ranch, his dad came to my dad, and he's like, hey, he goes, I want Juan to rope with Zane. That was my partner. And he's like, Zane's kind of new to this game. He said, I'll pay for everything. Of course, we were broke. I learned to fight because I wore my sister's hand-me-down jeans. Because kids made fun of me, and that's how I learned to fight. And but he said, I'll pay for everything. He said, I just want him to teach Zane and see where we go from there. And man, we started, and of course, I didn't know any different, so I started, and Zane was a dang good student, and we ended up winning the region, and we ended up going to state, and then we ended up getting past state. We just did what nobody thought we would do. Like, we were roping against kids that I grew up roping with, and they were roping together, and I got this kid who was like just started.
Yeah.
And we were beating them out at rodeos and doing a lot better than everybody expected to. So I was very proud. Everybody was proud. Heck, I wrote articles, on the newspapers and stuff like that. And my dad's reaction to all of that was like, well, that's pretty good. He said, but man, he said, if you would have just, he said, I heard you roped him on the second jump. He said, why didn't you rope him on the first? Well, Dad, because his feet were, he was doing the splits. I didn't have enough, but I couldn't tell him that. That's just who my dad was. It was always, I could always do something better. When I started training my own horses, my dad was very hard on a horse. He didn't know any better. Now, I watched him transform that because, I mean, he was one of those that dominated a horse. Like, I mean, yeah.
Spirit.
Yes. I mean, the horse would do it. Well, I wasn't really like that, you know, and I would work more. And this was just natural for me. I would work with one. And my dad's biggest thing was like, there's some horses that need spurs and some horses that don't. And if my dad ever saw me without my spurs, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, you want to talk about a butt chewing, you know, and like a real man, you know, you ain't no real, I mean, just like that, but he doesn't need them. I mean, you know, I can move him with my leg. I can move him with, you know, he don't know no better. But this, again, you got to understand, I watched him, and I guess I was part of that because he would see the results. And then he never told me, hey, well, you know what, you were right, or good job, never, but he just, his way, I guess, of complimenting me was by not saying anything, you know, and unbeknownst to me, like, that never really set in. It was after he passed that, you know, that his buddies were like, man, he said, you don't understand how proud he was, you know, when you did this, when you did that. And he was like, he was so worried about, you know, when y'all went up to, you know, Gillette, and then, you know, he was like just freaking out. And I was like, what? And I was like, no, my dad didn't give two craps about me most of the time, you know, or I didn't feel like it. But, you know, that's who my dad was. He was hard. He expected me to be better. He always expected me to, you know, whatever happened, you know, I guess his mentality was he was going to prepare me to land on my feet. And I'll be honest with you, like, a lot of his teachings did take hold. I mean, I've been in some pretty tough situations in my life where my head was better used for thinking than it was for a hat rack, and I've gotten myself out of, well, looking back, you know, God got me out of the situations,
Right.
But, you know, I was like,
Do you feel like you had to earn his respect or earn his love? Like, if you didn't perform, then maybe he wouldn't love you?
I think for me, I always knew that he loved me, but I never really felt it because I was always always having to, like, okay, because it got in my head, like, okay, you know, I did this, and what can I do to be better? And to this day, I have accomplished some pretty great things, you know, in my careers, when I was selling cars, especially in the company that I am right now. But even before that, you know, it's like, okay, you win this and it's great, you know, for just 2 or 3 seconds. And then that whole mindset, okay, what can I do to make it better?
Yeah.
And that's never really gone away. And I think in that aspect, yeah, I always felt like I always had to, like, I could not mess up, because as long as I was earning his respect, or, you know, his, I guess at this point, for him not to say anything, I had to keep performing. I had to keep, you know, and that was hard. Growing up that way, I mean, I kind of did it. I'll be honest with you. I mean, the biggest part of my first failed marriage was because of that, you know, because of my expectations. Because I hold myself to such a, I wouldn't even say a high, you know, caliber. It's just like, I don't even have a set expectation, because once I reach it, there's another one to reach, and then there's another one.
So it's more of a growth of expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And where I failed at was that I expected, you know, my ex to meet my expectations. You know, and my kids, you know, I expected them to meet my expectations, and, you know, and I still, I'll be honest with you, I still fight with that.
Do your kids know you're proud of them?
Yes.
Not because your buddies told them?
No, I made it a point to tell them when they did something good, tell them how proud I was of them. And I'm going to tell you the hardest thing. It's not so hard anymore, but at first, especially, you know, growing up, my youngest son, he's the one that kind of followed my footsteps a little bit. And I'm telling you, this kid had more talent with a rope than I ever thought about having. And I would watch him do something, and he would do something great. Like I'm telling you, like when he was 12 and 13 years old, I mean, he could rope a steer from here to the stairs.
Yeah.
And just not even think about it. Just whap, and just, no big deal. And can ride anything because, I mean, I kind of raised him that way. And it was the hardest thing. Like, man, I'm proud of you. And it was so hard because the next words that were fixing to come out of my mouth was exactly.
You could have done this different.
Yes. And it was the hardest thing to train myself not to do that.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I argue with my youngest daughter. Like, she has done some things that I never even dreamed of, and, she's still a kid, though. She messes up a little bit here and there. And, man, I just feel like, inside of me, I've got to come down on her because she screwed up right here,
Yeah.
and I forget about all these great things. And I'll tell you, God love her, my wife now, she is very good about pulling them reins back. Like, whoa, are you forgetting about, this? And she's, I'm telling you, my wife now, she's phenomenal. I know that I wear her out sometimes, but she's done really good. But yeah, it's those expectations, it was set from a young age. And, with my dad, it was one of the hardest things to do was to forgive him for the way, because I'm telling you, I got beat. I guess I was about, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, something like that. Had some family come over to Christmas. And my dad had put away a 6-pack of beer behind the seat of his truck. And he was like, hey, nobody was there. Nobody knew about it. He said, just leave this here. After everybody leaves, at least I'll have a little bit of beer. Okay. I never told anybody nothing. My cousin showed up, and everybody, it was a Christmas deal. Everybody joined. Anyways, whatever. Everybody left. My dad goes to go get his beer, and it wasn't there. So who does he ask? The only other person that knew that it was there was me. And he's like, where'd my beer go? And I'm like, I don't know. No, he said, you're the only one that knew. Well, I didn't get it. And don't be lying to me. He said, I punish a lie a lot more harder than I punish the truth. And I'm like, Dad, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't touch it. And, man, that commenced, dude. And I'm telling you, when my dad beat me, he didn't beat me with a belt. He beat me with a rope. And it got so bad. My oldest sister at this time, could not stand me. We had that sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
But I remember my sister was screaming at my dad to stop. That I remember I got beat down so hard that I lied to my dad. And I told him that I had taken that beer just to get him to stop. And then he did stop. And I'm just like, what kind of, I have to lie to you. I tell you the truth and you don't believe me, but I lied to you and you believe the lie. I mean, it was exhausting. And that's why when I became a dad, I tried to, whenever I do get on my kids, I explain to them why.
Yeah.
I explain to them, why I'm getting onto them, and
Trying to give them a lesson, not just a punishment.
Yeah, and I found out, man, like when you talk to the kids and for whatever reason, they're like, well, I was thinking, if you let the kids talk, well, I was thinking this and the other. They actually have a pretty good reason for why they messed up, And I've learned that, but that was a very hard thing for me to forgive my father for. And when we were doing the Forgiveness Forward class, they had said, hey, if this is something that really eats at you, really kind of, like doesn't settle good with you, that's unforgiveness. Well, when it came to my dad, I would think of my dad. And then one of the things that they tell you is like, hey, you bless them by just remembering like good things, especially those that have passed. How do you forgive those people that have passed? Well, and more things, you can forgive them, but how do you bless them? Well, you bless their memory.
Yeah.
And you ask anybody who remembers, like my cousins and obviously my siblings and stuff, I mean, they knew how I grew up, but a lot of people, they didn't know those stories, and they always talk about the great things. My dad was a great man, and he did a lot of great things. He gave respect where respect was to be given, and he demanded respect, where respect was to be demanded at. I mean, he was just that kind of guy. And everybody always remembers, my dad for some of the great things that he did. And I've always those are the memories I like to keep. So I was sitting there thinking well, hey,
A lot of people get sainted after they die.
Yeah.
Man, he never do nothing wrong. He was the best guy.
Yeah. They're like, oh man, he was just, he was this and he was that. Nobody ever says the bad things, But when I was sitting there and then they were like, well, my wife asked me, she was like, do you need to forgive, your dad? And I was thinking about that, well, no, I've forgiven him, because I choose to remember the good things. Yeah. I remember the bad things, yes, but I choose to share the good memories, And when we got on our one-on-ones, man, I'm going to tell you something. For all of you that have not gone through that, up until that point, I thought I was doing pretty dang good. And I like to consider myself not a real smart fella, but decently smart, thinking I had a grasp on it. And boy, was I wrong. And I really thought that I was going to struggle with, my ex being one of them and a couple other things, It was nothing, man. It was everything to do with my dad. And it was hard, man, because when the Holy Spirit goes in there and works on you, it's surreal. And you start I started remembering this and remembering that and it's each action. Now, one of the biggest things that a lot of people do not understand, I understand it now. And to be very honest with you, I did not understand it till about maybe 3 weeks ago, was that forgiveness is a transaction. The world will tell you that it's a process. And it's not a process. It's a transaction. You choose to forgive that person, and you forgive him, and you give it to God, you give it to the Holy Spirit, and then you bless them. That's how you seal that transaction. You give them that blessing, and man, I'll tell you, when they tell you that something is lifted. Dude, when I walked out of there, of course, it looked like I'd gotten beaten up, and but I felt so much lighter. And now, I'm going through the day, and yes, the world still gets to me, but I've learned how to deal with my anger.
We've overcome.
Yes, and it's funny how the enemy will always come at you like, okay, you got me here, and then he comes this way.
What about this area?
Yeah, but when I went through that again, I went into the class thinking I had a pretty good grasp on it, and now I realize I didn't have a grasp on nothing. I had an idea, but now to be able to recognize those things, and now that it doesn't affect me near as bad. Some things still get to me, but then I realize. It's the enemy coming at you,
Well, all three of us have lost our earthly father. All three of us, man. And I was thinking last week, preparing to do the father wound, Blink-182 has a song that has a lyric in it that says, "Don't waste your time on me. You're already the voice inside my head." And they repeat it over and over in the song. And still to this day, I can be actively doing something and I can just hear my dad, No, don't do it like that. You're not listening to me. Whatever it was, I just, hold on, be careful. Don't, I could just hear him. And I just wondered if you two men had that same deal. You can just hear your dad in your head just when you're doing something, hooking a trailer up, loading the car, whatever it is. I could just, my dad always knew. He was always better and always knew exactly how everything was supposed to be. And, a lot of it, he was right. A lot of it, he was right. Like most of it, 9 out of 10, most of it, he was right. But, he couldn't see another way.
Right.
And
yes, to answer your question, yes. But mine's a little bit different. So I was very mischievous as a kid. Growing up, in the cowboy way of life, we're always mischievous. We're always messing with people's gear and doing this and that. Yeah. Dude, I've been known to, put Vaseline in somebody's shotgun leggings, coil the rope up backwards or, just a bunch of different things. And just being, mischievous. But
you ever braid some tie-down ropes?
Yes.
together
Yes.
around the,
Yes.
around
Yes.
the trailer.
Yes. Or you take like a headstall and you put that buckle and make it just right out the edge of that hole. So whenever you kind of pull and push pressure, the headstall just comes off. Yeah. Yeah. And we did all of that. But my dad, like, he would always, like, when I knew I was in trouble is when my dad, he was like, Juanito Cabron, which, I mean, I'm pretty sure y'all know what cabron means. But, and still to this day, like, not so much when I'm doing things, but when I'm thinking about doing something mischievous, like I can still hear my dad, and it's like, and it's like he's right here, and I'm like, I gotta, okay. Oh, you can definitely hear him, and it's funny that you said that because I thought I was the only one that had that.
I can definitely hear mine.
Do you have your dad?
Oh yeah, I can hear him whenever, like, I'm even in like stuff that we never did together.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was thinking about it today. I remember a couple of years before my dad passed away, we were out in the truck, and he was like, you should think about getting into taxidermy. And I was like, what the crap are you talking about? Like, I'm a welder. Like, my dad was a welder. I worked with my dad, and we've traveled everywhere. But one day, just from completely left field, he was like, you should become a taxidermist. And I was like, that's the dumbest crap ever. Like, I don't have any artistic ability. And he was like, oh, you pay attention to the details. Like, he's like, you're probably a better welder than me whenever I was your age. And that was something that meant a lot to me, but still stupid that he would even mention taxidermy. And then the last Christmas that he was alive, he got me a machete that had like saw blades on the back, and I got it in my truck. It's the most ridiculous thing you'll ever see as far as a weapon goes. But I was like, what the heck am I going to use this for? And he was like, you never know, you might be a butcher one day or something. And I became a butcher after he passed away. So like, there were little things that my dad said to me that, like, now are just, like, mind-blowing. But I still, like, hear his voice, like, slow down, pay attention, just catch your breath. Because I was the worst about chasing my weld. I would get out of it or get a shaky hand or something and just completely screw it up. And he would be like, just slow down, just breathe, catch your breath, pay attention. And I miss him terribly. I actually was scrolling through some Snapchat videos from, I don't know, about 6 years ago. And it was of my dad playing the guitar. He was very talented in the guitar. And he sold himself short on so many levels because, like, he had his way of playing, but he was an amazing musician who taught himself. And he just learned to play by ear. And he'd always say, I've been learning to play guitar for 50 years. And that's kind of what I say. I've been learning to play guitar for 20 years now. And, it's that process that he kind of put into me of how to improve and do better. And I miss my dad terribly. He was honestly my best friend. He was definitely hard on me in certain areas, but also he gave me a lot of grace because I was the youngest, I was the baby, and my sister's 18 years older than me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so like there was a big age gap. He had me whenever he was 42, and like. I would hear stories of my dad, like how he was with his first. He had 3 kids, his first marriage, and that marriage that he was in was not a good marriage. Like he described it as the day that he said "I do," it turned into a running gunfight for 11 or 13 years.
Wow!
And I would hear stories of my dad from my other siblings, and Dad wasn't a nice guy all the time, but then by the time I came around he had grandkids also. So like he had grandkids probably, like, I think Lacey is 3 years younger than me, so like we were all
Our buddies.
all were friends, and like they were more siblings to me than my own siblings, you know.
Wow.
And I still have those relationships, and I'm very thankful for the family that I do have, and I think it was a pretty instrumental part of my raising. But my dad, he was such a unique man, and
So you kind of got your artistic flair from him. I mean, because playing the guitars is an art.
yeah, 100%. Like my nephew, he actually did the music for the episodes.
Yeah.
He actually created it, and then I was like, hey, I'd like to get that, because he'd show it to me on the side and stuff like that. And he's one of them that he can pick up anything and play it for 5 minutes and then be able to play any song that you've got. So it definitely, like, the artistic flair, and he was a welder. You know, that's, for me, that's an art within itself.
Yeah, fabricating.
Yeah, to be able to build something, to look in a direction and just envision something there and know all the steps that you have to take there, that's a pretty big ability.
Yeah, that's something I do not have.
It's exhausting, to be honest, because you're so critical of yourself. It's never good enough. You always need to make it better.
Look, Miranda was like, hey, you play guitar, right? I said, yeah. She sent me a long list of songs. If you know any of these songs, maybe you can lead worship one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. Well, I keep messaging Paul, and I'm like, hey, man, like, I can play these songs, but maybe I should, like, play with you to, like, make sure. Like, I need somebody to, like, sign off that I'm good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't want to come up here and play and then be like...
And they've never heard you or anything like that, yeah.
Maybe Miranda stopped singing. She's like,
You're not cutting it. Paul, come back.
like the middle of worship,
Yeah.
My buddy David doesn't have that problem. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm playing bass on Easter Sunday. I'm like...
What?
I'm like, that's
awesome.
Cool, like, we don't usually have a bass. It's gonna
we
be
don't
sick,
usually do the bass player. That's
it's gonna
cool.
be good, And then anyway, but we've talked about that before. Like, if you have an ear for that, it's hard to sit in a place and hear it not be right.
Yeah.
Because once you know how it should be,
Yeah.
For me, that's the thing. Like, the more I learned about my Heavenly Father, the more I learned about Jesus, the more I learned about God, the more I realized how much of a failure I am as a father, And then, and I don't always notice it, like, right when I'm doing the problem or having the sin or the failure, but, like, I really notice it right after. And, a lot of times I go to my kids and I go, I messed up. They're like, no, I'm like, no.
You don't get it.
Just listen. Like, if you want to own your problem, great. But, like,
Let me own mine.
I'm the dad, and I shouldn't have done that.
That's something that with my youngest daughter, I have been able to do. I can do it now, with my oldest kids, because they're out. I've got 5 grandkids. And but I can.
You're a grandpa,
dude. Yeah, fixed to be 6 grandkids actually.
Dang, that's awesome.
I guess I could be by 48 because I'm 40 and my daughter's 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
she could have kids in the next 8 years, though she says it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I have a 26. Well, she's 27 now. Year old. I'm sorry, 28. She just turned 28.
28?
Wait. My oldest son is 31. And then it's my oldest daughter. She just turned 28. And then I have a 23-year-old son. And then my youngest daughter's 17.
Yeah, and those other 3.
Yeah, are you really pulling out the calculator?
Yeah. Them teaching ladies, they told us that we'd never, have calculators in their pockets.
Hold on, I got one right here.
Yeah, he's got one on his wrist.
It's got a button for tips, and you can just put in.
Oh, really?
You just put in the total and hit enter, and it'll tell you 5%, 10%, 20.
Oh, wow. That's
so those first 3, that was from your first wife's previous relationship.
Those were
okay, and
biologically those were her kids.
Yeah, those you.
Was she older than you?
You just kind of.
By 2 years.
Oh, you're getting old. Wait. Is your current wife younger than you?
Yes.
How many?
Now it's really, this is really the two dudes. I mean, three dudes.
How many years younger is your?
7.
Oh, my wife's 8 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And I was worried that like we wouldn't have anything in common,
Yeah.
which is stupid because
Isn't that like seriously like when my wife now and I were dating, like, and she would tell you, like, I would tell her like, hey, right girl, wrong time. You know, because I had set my mind on, you know, I'd already been through all of this. My daughter was, I had her going right and everything, and I was going to stay by myself till my daughter graduated, you know, and then she was kind of the same way. Now, she'd been divorced for a while, kind of got out of a bad relationship, and she was kind of the same way. She's like, look, I wasn't looking for this either, but when I mean, I knew how much younger she was than I was from the get-go. And I had the same mentality. I'm like, man, I'm not going to talk. I mean, we would talk literally for hours. And just about it was crazy how much stuff we had in common, you know, or the way we would look at things. And, you know, it was crazy. And I was just like, well, maybe I do. And I was like, and I did ask her one time, I was like, so is it that you're actually acting older or me acting younger? Because I'm thinking I'm acting younger. And she was like, no. She goes, I've always been told I'm a little bit older for my age. And I was like, well, thanks, you know.
Yeah, when it's right, it's right.
Yeah.
That's another thing, you know. You almost can't believe it. Like you said earlier before we started, like, man, this second marriage is pretty good, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm in the same boat, and I know I don't deserve it, you know. Even the little rough patches we have or little arguments or something, I'm just like grateful, dude. I love my wife, you know.
We just come back and we have, I don't know, like we have kids, and of course, you know, we have grown kids, and then we have 2 kids still at the house and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, like, I think it was last night before last, you know, I was talking to the kids that are still at the house. I was like, look, I said, between your mother and I, you know, talking about my wife now, because her son, my stepson, he's there also. He's the youngest now. And I told us, like, look, I said, we're going to get it right with you two, okay? You know?
Yeah.
But it's crazy how much, like, when her and I get off just by ourselves, like, literally time flies, conversations, time is fun. It is. And then we kind of get back into the world, and she's a realtor, and she's got another job, and she's always busy, always behind. So, and then I get to, and then the world kind of gets to you. But man, every day it's like I look forward to, like, when everything shuts down, just those 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes just for us. And I never had that before. Like, I look forward to just talking just to her, no outside distractions, just for a little bit before I go to sleep. And that's it. I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, my first marriage, I got to where, like, if I got off work, I would find anything to do but go home. And, like, with this one, if I get a second, I'm like, are you still awake? You know, like, one night, like, I'm sure she's in bed right now because it's 8:40. And, like, when I get home, I'm going to be like, I got to wake her up. You know? I got to, like, talk to her for a bit. You know?
Yeah, dude, I used to go, like, I built my dream home and stuff. This was my first marriage. Had land, had everything. I mean, I built it right. I'd set it up to where I was going to be debt-free by the time I was 51. You know, had done all of that, and I would literally I would come home, and I would go down to the barn, and I would just hang out with the horses or whatever, just so I wouldn't go inside. You know, and now it's like, you know, walk in, what are you doing? You know, and then, you know, like, man, I know I got to go out and mess with the horses, or I got to do this, I got to do that. And then next thing I know, I'm sitting there talking, and then it got dark, and I'm like, crap, I didn't get it done. It's a complete opposite. It really is. But I credit that to my journey as far as, like, maturity. I remember coming back. I was coming back from West Texas. I don't remember where I was, though, but this is while I was going through my divorce, and I was still, you know, I was one of those that, you know, you got married once and you stayed married.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, I was already, like, I could hear God, you know, talking to me. And that's the first time I ever heard the word journey. Never thought about it as a journey, but I remember I'm like, man, what can I do? what can I say to her, talking about my ex, like what, to make this work, because my daughter really needs her. This is a critical age. I went to her and I was like, hey, look, we can stay together once, she graduates, we can get whatever, And I remember, like, the Spirit just told me, he's like, look, you concentrate on your journey. She's got to concentrate on hers. And, that was one of the things that I started, what's a journey, and kind of led from there. And I think everybody's journeys is the same way. It's just funny how, and I don't know, I mean, you guys, y'all been in the mountains and followed trails, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny how you got these trails and they're all separate and then they kind of intersect for a little bit and they split up and stuff like that. To me, when I think of journeys, that's what I think of.
Yeah.
Like we joined the same trail for a little bit and then who knows? You're out exploring, right? Mm-hmm. And who knows? I mean, down the road, the trails might split.
Yeah.
And you've got to make a decision. And I really think that with my current wife, I really think that we would make the decision to continue on the same trail because we do look at life a lot. We come from two different worlds, but similar backgrounds. So it is different. And I'll tell you, like, she chases God every day.
That's so important.
Every day, that woman, she listens to this podcast. And the other day, man, I felt like crap afterwards. But she listens to this podcast, and it's called like Bible in a Year or something like that. And every morning, she gets up, she does her thing, she puts it on, and we're getting ready. And this is a time that I really want to like visit and talk. And we do, but then she puts that on, and the guy, I don't know, that morning I guess I just kind of got up a little bit pissy, I guess. Yeah. And the dude, he does talk a little monotonous. And I'm more of all right, if we're going to listen to something, let's listen to some upbeat music, kind of get the day going, and I did pop off, and I was like, hey, I said, I said, you really got to put him on again? She's like, what? She goes, I'm listening to the Bible. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I said, but that dude's just so monotonous. She's like, oh, okay. And she shut it off, and then I'm like, okay. So then I start talking to her, and she's like, what? She'd put her earbuds in. And when she did, I looked at that, and I was like, dang, I definitely come second, know, and that throughout that whole day, I was thinking about that. Now, when she hears this is the first time she's going to hear that because I didn't admit that to her, but I was really proud of her, because she chose not to like argue and justifiably she could tell me like, what are you saying? I mean, I'm not saying that I was sacrilegious or anything, but she just chose not to fight, but she was going to listen to the Bible, by gosh.
She was definitely the bigger person.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the woman that I married, and it takes a bigger man. I guess I'm doing the same thing my dad did. I don't tell her I'm proud of her. I'm telling you guys I'm proud of her. So maybe when I get home, I need to go and tell her.
There you go. There's a challenge for the evening right there.
Yeah, it's definitely, man. And I tell you, that you mentioned something a while ago that's really important to me. I spent my whole life hiding stuff from my dad. Lying, doing this, doing that, and to be honest with you, my dad taught me to live life like a game of chess, not checkers, and a year, almost to the day before he passed away, something happened where that last year of his life is when he and I were actually friends. Yeah. And he passed away in 99, and there's still things to this day that happen in my life where I want to call my dad from that year. Yeah. I spent like a year and a half. I got down into Mexico. I mean, I could go into that story too. Anyways, just the whole thing was, got my truck keyed and this, that, and the other. My dad was asking me what's going on, and I told him a lie. And then a little bit later, he'd ask me, what was it that happened? So I'd tell him a little bit something. Well, as time went on, heck, I'd forget what I told him. Yeah. And then it became like a whole like, well, wait a minute, you had told me that this and this, but now you're telling me this, and I started to get my lies all mixed up.
It's like he's building a case.
Yeah, and it took like I'm gonna say probably over a year. And I remember one time when it happened, I was driving him back, and he brought it back up again, you know, and we were going back to the ranch, and he was like, well, no, you said this. Oh, no, well, it was because of this, because of that. Well, yeah, okay. But that other time you told me this, really cornered me to the point to where I just broke down.
Yeah.
And I don't know what got into me. Literally emotion got into me, and I was just like, Dad, I've been lying to you. This is what happened. This, that, and the other. And I remember I was crying, but it wasn't like that boo-hoo crying. I was crying, I think, out of anger. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was, but I remember tears. Yeah, embarrassment. Yeah, maybe. I remember tears are coming down my face, and I'm just like this, that, and the other. And when I was done, I remember bracing myself because here come the ass chewing. I can say that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Just asking.
You're clear.
But, and I braced myself. And, I was just kind of looking forward. And when it didn't come, I kind of looked over, and he was just looking at me. And he just goes, now, was that hard? Caught me completely by surprise. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, was it that hard to tell me the truth? He said, and he did ask, he said, have I made your life so hard to where you can't tell me the truth? And now this is the part where I really saw my dad evolving.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I was like, well, I don't know. And he was like, you do know, because we were in Mexico and we got arrested. And I had a bunch of money. Well, it so happened that it was ironic how the bail money that I had in my pocket was just enough to get us out of jail. And I left. My dad goes, you do know that the captain of the police down there is my cousin, right? And that's when it clicked. Yes, I knew that. I never, in the year and a half that I'd been telling these lies, it never occurred to me. So my dad from day one knew exactly what had happened.
Yeah.
And I just dropped my head, and we had one of the best conversations. And my dad did tell me, he was like, I know I've been hard on you. He said, but I've been hard on you for a reason. Mm-hmm. And from that day forward, he was my best friend. I could literally tell him anything. Yeah. And I saw the man that everybody else saw.
Yeah.
But it took my dad did do a lot of transforming at the time. And he was, and God had a lot to do with it, because my Uncle Hector, after my dad died, the time that I was kind of like in just remote, I don't know, robot status, whatever you want to call it, my Uncle Hector, very spiritual man, very strong spiritual man. Everybody was kind of like shocked. Here's this strong man that just had a massive heart attack and was gone from one second to another. Wow. And my Uncle Hector said that when we were walking, because we accompanied my dad on horseback, to the cemetery. And I remember from the church, it was in Van Horn, and from the church to the cemetery is about, 3.5 miles. It was pretty far. And afterwards, I remember a guy had asked one of my cousins, he had asked me, he's like, man, he said, whose funeral is it? And he told him, he's like, man, he said, it must have been an important man. He said, why is that? And he said, I was trying to get across. He said, the highway. He said, but the procession line, he said, was so long. He said that people were still pulling out of the church parking lot when they were getting to the cemetery. Wow. There was that many people there. But my Uncle Hector said that, he remembers seeing, well, he heard my dad tell him, he said, take care of him. He said, I'm in a good place now. And there's been some other things that have confirmed, I know where my dad is. My mom she was a wreck. She couldn't understand why. And my dad had gotten into drinking. And my dad was a very prideful man. And he was kind of getting more and more into drinking. And my mom, one night, she was just, praying and just trying to figure out why. And a thought occurred to her, and then she started praying, and it was confirmed that God went ahead and took him because he was losing a battle. And it was to the point to where my mom is very, and I am too, convinced that my dad's pride could not have handled if he would have fallen off, If we would have just become an alcoholic, like a full-fledged alcoholic,
Yeah.
we really don't think that my dad's pride could have handled that. And so God took him. And we know he's there because I know he's there because he still jokes with me and he plays with me, kind of like God does, and when they say God, they say God's so serious. No, God's got jokes.
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure we can all confirm that. But that's what I like to tell people is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, or whatever. All you got to do is just stop a minute. Like you were talking about your wells, just breathe a little bit. He'll show up.
Yeah.
God wants to meet that, and I'm a testament of it. God wants to meet you where you're at. You just got to slow down enough for him to kind of appear. But he's done a lot. To go back to one of the first questions you asked, Ray, where have I met God? Everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, he has shown up for me. One of the biggest things for me, especially being a Hispanic, I grew up around a bunch of old white cowboys, and I guess y'all can tell by the way I speak English.
I know that dialect.
Yeah, but I can see that when they talk about gifts, I really think that my gift is, perspective is that mediation thing, because I can see it from both sides, and it is kind of hard to sit there and watch somebody just really butting their heads against the wall, and it's just so easy, just stop for just a second.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of strong men that I never even thought. Like, I mean, who would have thought? I mean, if somebody were to walk in and us three, by just looking at us, would they think that we're actually sitting here holding church?
Yeah.
No. I mean, the world will tell you no. But that's the beauty of it, man. You just never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. He's the God of all nations, of all people, and of all time.
Yeah.
I in all generations. I can't wait till we get to heaven and we are getting to have conversations with somebody from 600 years ago, from 1,000 years ago, from even before Jesus's time. I can't wait to have that time and conversations with people.
Especially, when you're such a history nut like I am, man. Dude, that's going to be interesting. But the good thing is, if y'all have read Revelations, it said that there was, a good half hour where it was silent. I'm guessing that's when all the men get there, and then half an hour later the women get there.
We just lost 30% of our viewership.
There they went. All right, this has been an episode of Two Dudes, One God.
Well, Juan, it's been awesome having you on, man. Is there anything that you want to say before we close it down?
No, just thank you guys. I'm in Mineola. If anybody ever wants, just look me up. Everybody knows Big Juan. That seriously. And if you don't, just ask. Somebody will know who I am. I've been blessed with that.
You still got roping horses?
Yeah, I'm in the training session. I train, and I really that is my therapy.
Yeah.
Like getting on a young horse.
Yeah.
And
Pat wants to come hang out with
Yeah, I'm gonna come to your house.
Yeah,
Man.
dude, I've got a sorrel horse right now. I've got 2 horses, and if you look at them, dude, I mean they're good looking. I do like to have good looking horses. My wife is very good looking. I am not. That way, I make up for it by my wife.
You do kind of look like you might be like a villain in like a Western movie.
I'm telling you, dude. I'm telling you. Yeah.
You're like a bandito.
Maybe even like a James Bond movie.
Yeah.
No, I'm kind of thinking more like, No Country for Old Men.
Yeah,
like he's,
That was in Marfa. That was filmed in Marfa.
Yeah.
So that opening scene of that movie.
That's you.
I was like, dude, I know exactly where that's at. I know that West Texas. I know it like the back of my hand. But anyways, dude, it's one of the things. Like I said earlier, like I really look more like a hitman for the narcos than I do who I actually am. Yeah. But that has actually helped because a lot of people, like when I talk about God, people get kind of, it's that shock, little shock, like, oh my God, what? And it catches their attention. But No, I mean, I just tell them, if I can help anybody, I'm always open. But if I can get the message out there, look into this forgiving forward thing. It is literally, I'm not going to tell you it's the key, but it's definitely a foundation piece, a very important foundation piece of finding your inner peace.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at the Lord's Prayer. Forgiveness is literally right in the middle of it.
Hey, but on the Lord's Prayer, one of the hardest things that never hit me was when it says, forgive us our sins as we forgive others. That part right there, if you really break it down, that's a big step. Because if you really think what God has forgiven each and every one of us for, and then we're asking God to forgive us that, but we can't forgive somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's what really resonated with me, was because, I can ask God to forgive me for all these terrible things that I've done to people, whatever the case may be, but I can't forgive, Billy over here because he cussed me out one time. I mean, it's really like, when you put it in that perspective, it's like mind blowing. Like you were saying earlier, it's just, it's just one of those things that we are terrible. We are not deserving of forgiveness. And the only thing he asks, he's like, hey, just try to forgive them.
Yeah.
And see what happens, Just, and I'll tell you, I'm a testament. Like, try God. Try him. Just seriously, just try him, and see what happens.
Yeah, if anybody wants information on Forgiven Forward, I'll put a link in the thing, and you can reach out to me or Pat or Juan or Brian Childress.
Yeah.
So we've got the stuff up. And
Yeah, that's one of the things, and the last thing, I know we've got to go, but I speak a lot to the Hispanic community, and that's really who I try to get, because especially now, with Trump being in office and stuff like that, I see more of a division than ever.
Yeah.
And there's some that kind of get what's going on and some that don't, but I try to get on a platform. And just the other day, I used to be on the Spanish radio station and kind of develop a radio personality, and was actually like guest DJ and stuff.
What?
And
Okay, I can see it.
Víctor Covarrubias. Yeah, dude, if you look back, I mean, I'd be like,
Yo, both-
Saludos, aquí les habla Juan Carrasco, el peladote de Chihuahua. I mean,
not only do I have the face for radio, I've got the voice.
Bro, you come up here acting like you had never even seen that mic in your life.
Oh no, dude, I've been here. Did I tell you I've been in movies?
No,
Yeah.
dude, no. Oh man, that's a whole nother episode.
So my buddy Jason Owens, he's actually in the last. Y'all know the show Yellowstone? His wife is actually one of the biggest camera directors on that. He and I grew up together, and then he actually came out. Like, he's an extra, and he handles all the horses and stuff. And he actually came out on some of the episodes and stuff like that. So, yeah, no, I've been in several movies. Larry McMurtry. I'm a big fan of Larry McMurtry. Did a lot of those old westerns, Streets of Laredo, which were kind of like the
Lonesome Dove.
Lonesome Dove, Dead Man's
Sequels.
Walk,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I was in some of those. So.
I'm very familiar with Lonesome Dove.
What did he say? He said, "Well, the fact is, we don't rent pigs." But the thing is, like, I tried to take my experiences, but we were talking on the radio station with my buddy Victor Covarrubias. He reached out to me. He's like, "Hey man," he said, "I know what you're doing. I got an idea." He said, "I want you to come back and let's visit." So we visited. And I just recorded, I just did an hour-long interview last Saturday, and then did some commercials and stuff. But his idea is literally taking like Hispanics and talking, like taking like doing a podcast, but on a radio.
Yeah.
And he was like, "What do you think about that?" And I was like, "Well," I said, "Okay, cool." I said, "I can talk about insurance." I said, "But he's like, no. He said, "I want to hear stories." He said, "Because you've obviously come from where you come from." He said, he said, "You were very successful, and I was very blessed in the car business, and now kind of making my name in the insurance world with my company. Of course, I'm little things, but I've accomplished a lot of great things in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Within the company that I work for. And he was like, so for you to talk to the Hispanic community and let them know that, hey, there is a way here. He said, we want to hear stories. And I flat out told him, I said, well, my story revolves around God. And he was like, exactly.
Yeah.
He goes, and I've got 3 other guys. He goes, and I told him about this podcast. And I was like, it's actually called Two Dudes. And he asked me, he's like, what's dudes?
Hombres.
And I was like, vatos.
Oh, vatos.
And he was like, órale, dos vatos. And I'm like, yeah. So y'all have been mentioned in the Spanish, Spanish radio,
Yeah.
But he's kind of wanting to do that. And that's just a testimony as how far God works.
Yeah.
Through little medias.
Louis Blom, what was it that he said? He said the harvest is ripe.
Yeah.
Yeah, the harvest is ripe right now.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer that everybody's hungry because we've had so many people, and I don't even mean to get off on this tangent, but we've had so many people in the space in Hollywood and in every area where they've done the thing where they push God out. They've pushed it. And, with this last 4 years, or was it? Yeah, it was 4 years with Biden. They did a big effort on pushing God out.
Yes,
and
they did.
You see the awakening that is happening right now. I'm a firm believer that Jesus is coming soon.
Yes.
On a personal level, but just because Jesus is coming soon doesn't mean that our work isn't done.
No.
And the more that people hear stories, that's why, I wouldn't call this podcast necessarily successful, but the reason why so many people are interested in it is because they want to hear stories about people. They want to hear what information, life experiences, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what this church is really about is that life experience, the getting to know one another. And I think that it's all a part of God's plan. And
I agree 100% with that. And I really think, I'll take it a step further. I really think guys of our generation, and yes, Pat, I'm pulling you into my generation, just because of the men that were influences in my life and the men that I still talk to today and knowing your background, now I know a little bit about yours, we kind of grew up in a lot of ways the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now that I see, especially like with my daughter and the youth class that she's in, and see those kids, like there's kids in that youth class that their parents don't go to church, but they do.
yeah.
And they're so tied into that, and they're just like, they're so on fire. I really think that army that God builds, I really think it starts with guys like us that are a little bit older, that grew up rough. Now, I know you better than I know you, Pat, but I'm a pretty good judge of character. Now, I can pretty much safely say that every one of us here does not look for a fight, but we won't shy away from one either.
Yeah.
And that's everybody of our generation is that way.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody that I have talked to has a similar story. We went through tough times. We went through, we faced whatever it was that we faced and overcame them through God. And we know the strength. But again, we ain't scared of a fight.
Yeah.
And I really strongly believe that we're the army that's going to lead that charge. And that's why the youth, and it's not just at our church. Like I've talked to other churches, and it's youth groups are growing. They're growing, and they're really getting on fire.
And they need us. They need the wisdom, the people that have made the mistakes. We've got some kids, 17, 16 to 23 that come here that haven't, gotten pregnant out of marriage, they haven't done it. And they're like actively looking up to us like, hey, I've got this problem. What do I do? I'm like, wow. When I was that age, I was
not even thinking about that.
I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't want to know what my dad thought, but I also didn't want to know what some other guy almost my dad's age thought.
No, definitely. No, back then you kept it a secret.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing that I'm talking about. It's like I really think like we're the front of it, and they can kind of see that. And it's going to be up to them to really spread.
Yeah.
You know, and I firmly believe that because everybody that I've talked to kind of in our age group, like similar stories. You know, some a little bit worse than others, but it's always one of those things. Like the common denominator to me is the older generation won't back down from a fight because that's what we're in.
Yeah.
Because the enemy comes at you every which way he can, and it's a fight. It's a daily fight. And I tell you, like, I'll get my butt whooped on a daily basis, but by gosh, I'll tell you, like, I went to a black church the other day, and it's not really a black church, but it's a church there in Mineola that everybody calls a black church. Love the people there, and he did it, and the pastor there did a demonstration that I had never seen before. Now, granted, you know, I've read the Bible, I've talked to some pretty holy guys, but he did something that really stands out to me. He stood there and he brought 3 kids up, and one was a little bitty. He was, I don't know, like maybe 5 or 6. The other one was about maybe 11 or 12, and the other one was like a 17-year-old. And he put them side by side. He goes, if anybody ever wrestles with the idea of the Trinity, you know, of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, he says, I'm fixing to show you what it is. He said, it's 3 different beings. He said, but he said, they're all in one. He said, because look, and then he lined them up. He put the 17-year-old in front, the other one in the middle, and then the little in the back. So when you looked at them from the front, you could only see one person.
Right.
He said, and you just got to focus on that one person.
Yeah.
He said, and then when the problems come at you, he said, here I am. And he stood in front of the 17. Now, he's a big guy. So he stood in front of me. He said, can you see who's behind me? Like, no. Right? He said, the problem's coming at me. He said, the enemy's coming at me. He said, the problem that I have is being able to do this. And then he stepped away. He said, because that enemy, that problem doesn't know who's behind me. He said, now, he said, all of a sudden, it's not 1-on-1, it's 2-on-1. He said, but check this out. And then he spread them. He said, now it's 4-on-1, and all I got to do is sit over here. He said, but the biggest problem we have is stepping out of the way. He said, so God, he said, can take care of it.
Wow. Yeah.
Just seeing that, I was like, okay. It was pretty powerful. So anyway, it was good.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, man. I feel like I've gotten to know you pretty well now.
Yeah, dude, and I really appreciate it. And like I said, anything I can do for you guys, y'all let me know.
Yeah, same thing, man. You've really blessed us with your stories and your life, and you put your purpose out there, which is big. You know, I think God will bless that. And
Definitely.
I hope that anybody listening, really listens to what he said, because I think there's some big stuff there.
There's a lot of stuff that I still need to accomplish, but I know that it'll get done one way or another.
Well, you could have done better.
I know. But you know what? I've learned to live with that.
That's it. It don't hurt no more.
Exactly. So.
All right. Well, that's been another episode of Two Dudes, One God Pod. Tune in next time to hear about horses again, because we've got Lou Starrett coming. You know Lou?
No.
Well, you're going to probably like this next episode.
You're definitely going to like this next one.
Everybody I know in the cowboy universe knows who this guy is.